Hello, it's Alex, the Bookubus. I am going to talk about all of the books I read in September in this video. I am currently not feeling well, I'll be honest. I have actually been feeling ill for the past couple of weeks, and yeah, I have been dealing with some gastrointestinal things, so it's not been super fun. And I had plans to film a reading wrap-up video this weekend, but I've just been feeling absolutely lousy and have like zero energy. But I still really wanted to film something and talk about these books, and figured, even though I didn't particularly want to get in front of the camera, we would do it this way instead. So hopefully this is a good compromise. And yeah, I hope this doesn't come across as like a half-hearted video, because my heart is definitely in it, but unfortunately my body and energy levels have other ideas. But I am, trying to make it work. So September was a really good reading month for me, and I took part in the Ladies of Horror Fiction readathon, which I co-hosted with them. And the readathon was initially meant to just be, I think it was the 1st to the 15th of September, but I know some of the Ladies of Horror Fiction team and myself decided to just continue it throughout the whole month, because why not? And I ended up reading 8 books in total, and I enjoyed them all, so it was a great reading month. So yeah, let's talk about them. First up, I read Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. This is a novella about a character called Laura, who, when she was young, her best friend went missing, never to be seen again. And she receives a letter from someone claiming to have details about her friend's disappearance, but they will only give her this information if she gives them something in return. And the letters continue, and the requests get more and more serious. And yeah, this was an excellent one. I really enjoyed it. It was a great mix of, like, the story was definitely filled with a lot of tension and dread, and it was also very emotional. So yeah, I thought the combination worked really well. I was invested in the story and just needed to know what was going to happen. Yeah, I thought this one was great and definitely recommend it. I rated it 4 stars. Then I read Class Trip by Bebe Faas. This is a YA from the 90s about a teenage girl called Angie and a bunch of other students who are going on the titular class trip to a remote island for study purposes for one of their classes. But as the tagline on the cover suggests, there is a killer on the loose, and the friends are being picked off one by one. This was a really fun one, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really liked her writing and the characters, and while I did guess where the story was going from fairly early on, that didn't spoil my enjoyment of the story and seeing it all unfold. So yeah, this one was really fun, and I rated it 3.5 stars. And yeah, this was my first book by this author, but I am definitely curious to read more by her. Next, I read Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. This is a fairly recent release and is about a photographer called Irina who lives in Newcastle, and she likes to photograph guys. Some of the content may involve nudity and potentially some kind of S&M themes, and some of the guys she scouts as models may be underage. And I think when I talked about this in my TBR video, I said that it was set in London. It isn't. I got that bit wrong. It is mostly set in Newcastle, but the character Irina does have a gallery show that takes place in London. So anyway, definitely UK based, which I really, really liked. There were lots of just British references that I thoroughly enjoyed. And this one definitely has a strong American Psycho vibe, not only in the main character, because she is probably a sociopath, potentially a psychopath, and there are some scenes that are, quite gruesome at times, akin to American Psycho, but also in the sense of the unreliable narrator, and is this character really doing these things, or is it all in their head? But I did think, even though there were very strong similarities in some ways to American Psycho, I do think this does its own thing with that idea, and I thought seeing it from a female perspective was really, really interesting, because it does touch on a lot of themes of being a woman, basically, and this character in particular is, she just really wants to make her mark on the world, and partly that's through her photography. You know, she wants to be like recognised for her art, but yeah, there's more to it than that, and I don't want to go into too much detail on this one, even though I do have a ton of things to say about it, because I did find it to be such a great read. And I did read this as a buddy read with my friend Emily, and we both really, really enjoyed it, and we both had so much to say about it as we were going along. So it really is the kind of book that I think you can get a lot out of. I think it makes for a really excellent discussion. There are a lot of ideas and themes and topics brought up in here that, there's a lot to dissect from it. And even aside from that, it was just a really great read. The character of Irina she's pretty awful, and she does some really horrible things, but she's also super fascinating and hilarious at times. So yeah, it's this weird, conflicting kind of character, but yeah, definitely very readable. I think my only real negative for this one was that at some point during the middle it did get a bit repetitive, and I was worried that it had kind of just hit like a one note type of story, and it wasn't quite living up to how strong the story had started out, but it definitely picks up again, so I needn't have worried. This definitely goes to some places, and I thought it was excellent. It's one that I'm still thinking about, even though I read it almost a month ago probably, and I would definitely recommend it. I rated this one 4 stars. Next, I read Voice of the Blood by Jemiah Jefferson. This is a vampire novel, and it is following a 20-something character called Ariane. She is a grad student and working on her research. Anyway, one day she encounters what turns out to be a vampire, and the story goes from there. Basically, she gets caught up in a kind of relationship with this vampire, and things turn out maybe going into a different direction than she had planned or expected. And yeah, it's hard to say too much about this one without going into spoilers, but I thought it was great. I really enjoyed her writing style and the characters. They were all awesome. And this one gave me vibes of both Interview with the Vampire and Lost Souls. So it was like a combination of the two, but then also it was its own separate thing as well, which, yeah, I thought that was great. I guess it kind of had that more classical and romantic and historical type of vampire story, but then also with this more modern kind of rock and roll, edgy, visceral and sexy vampire. And yeah, this one definitely has some gruesome scenes and it has some pretty graphic sex scenes. Basically, bodily fluids of all kinds are going on here a lot of the time, so if that isn't what you want to read about, then maybe avoid this one. But yeah, I thought it was great, and this is actually the first book in a series, and I'm not much of a series reader, but this is one I would absolutely continue with, so hopefully I can track down the other books. And yeah, I'm just really surprised that I had never really heard of this book or this author, because yeah, she's definitely talented, and I thought this one was excellent. This was another 4-star read for me. Next, I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This copy was very kindly sent to me by Laura over at Let's Get Fictional, so big thank you again to Laura. Really glad I finally picked this one up. I really enjoyed it. The author is South Korean, and this was translated by Deborah Smith. And this is about a character. She is married, and one day she decides she does not want to eat meat anymore. She wants to become vegetarian, and within their culture this is not a very typical thing to do, unless you have like a medical reason to do so. And so her husband and family are all really taken aback by this change in her attitude and see it as really quite abnormal, and are just constantly trying to convince her to go back to eating meat again. I mean, that is the basis of the story, but it is so much more than that, and it's told in quite an interesting way, which I won't say any more about because I liked going into this book really not knowing much of anything and just seeing where it went. But it's very literary. I think it's first and foremost literary fiction, but it does have some horror elements. It is quite dark and disturbing in places, and yeah, I really enjoyed her writing and the characters. The story was fascinating and really well told. It was really just a heartbreaking book, honestly. I found this to be a really heavy book, and I mean, I read a lot of dark stuff, but it's not often that something, you know, once I'm finished with it, that it just leaves me with this like feeling of, yeah, wow, that was heavy, you know. It was honestly really quite depressing, I'm not gonna lie. It was bleak, and yeah, it's hard to really put into words how to describe this one, and I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of recommending it, but yeah, I thought this one was excellent, and the ideas in here were very interesting. The look at Korean culture and traditions was fascinating, and yeah, I just thought this one was an absolutely fantastic read, even though it was a tough one, and I rated it 4 stars. Next I read Cackle by Rachel Harrison. This is a new release that just came out in October, and I got an advance copy through NetGalley. Yeah, it's the first NetGalley thing I've had in quite some time, probably a couple of years even. I don't use that site too often anymore, but yeah, there's been some titles that I have requested, you know, in the past year or so, and I've always been declined for them. I'm not sure why, because I think there's only one book that I had requested and haven't reviewed. Like, everything else I have reviewed, so I don't really know why I'm like, I never get approved for anything on there. But anyway, not a big deal. On to Cackle. So this is about a character called Annie. She has just turned 30 and she has recently come out of a long-term relationship, and she is feeling really stranded and alone, and the way that she thought her life was going has all of a sudden taken a completely different turn. She ends up taking a teaching job in a small town in upstate New York, so she leaves the city and kind of sets off on this new life. And the town she's moved to is very quaint, the people are really nice and friendly, and she meets one lady in particular called Sophie, who is extremely beautiful and charming and friendly, and so they very quickly strike up a friendship. But Annie soon notices that some of the other townsfolk are a bit wary of Sophie, so she has these conflicting feelings of wanting to be friends with her but also wondering if she should be keeping her distance. But yeah, essentially this is a story about finding yourself and learning to love yourself, and yeah, through Sophie, Annie, you know, goes on this journey of self-discovery. And yeah, this one was fun. I enjoyed it, and it is definitely a lot lighter than, you know, the type of fiction I typically go for. There are some darker moments in here, don't get me wrong, but on the whole it is pretty light, and it has, yeah, a witchy vibe going on. I thought this was really well written. I got into her writing very easily and found it to be a very absorbing read. I enjoyed her humour, and I could definitely relate in many ways to the character of Annie. So yeah, that got me invested in the story. And yeah, while this one maybe isn't my typical kind of book, I did still enjoy it. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a bit of a lighter horror read. And I know she has another book out already called The Return, which I think is meant to be a bit darker, so on the basis of this one I would absolutely like to check that one out. And also I look forward to, yeah, seeing what else she comes out with. Next I read The Mirror of Night by Roberta Lannes. It's a very shiny cover, so this is kind of the best angle to get it at, so hopefully you can still actually see it. This is a short story collection, and I thought it was excellent. Like I said, all of these books this month I've really enjoyed, so yeah, there wasn't a bad one amongst them. And this one is definitely dark. It definitely deals with a lot of disturbing subject matter, some extreme, and I really enjoyed her writing style. And yeah, this is maybe a hard one to recommend to everyone because, I mean, yeah, there are definitely content warnings here for sexual abuse and some things involving children, and yeah, incest and just abuse in general, grooming. There's just a lot of yeah, kind of very dark and So yeah, just to be aware of that. If you want to avoid those kind of things, then maybe skip this one. But it's an excellent short story collection. It's my first time reading her work, and as far as I know, she has not published any novels, but I think her short stories, can be found in a bunch of different anthologies. So I would be keen to read more of her work as I come across it. But yeah, just to give you a bit of a better idea content-wise, the first story is about bestiality, so, if you're not on board with that one, you're probably, good to kind of X out of it at that point from the get-go. And yeah, I've already mentioned some other things content-wise, but yeah, I thought all of these stories were great, but there were a few in particular that I guess kind of stood out even more. One of them was called The Shy Fruit of Paphos, which was about an empath, and yeah, this was just such a really unique and original idea, I thought, about this character who is kind of able to heal people by literally taking on their problems, their feelings. But because of that, she is now dying, and she's having to be kind of housed in this very limited access facility. But then she ends up kind of striking up a relationship with someone that she speaks to, but hasn't actually met in person. There's a story called Precious, which was maybe the most, definitely one of the most gruesome ones in the collection, and it's about an OBGYN, and I mean, yeah, I don't want to go into the specific details, but it was super gross and it was brilliant. Yeah, like I said, overall this was a really excellent collection. I think unfortunately it is a bit harder to find because I think this was only a limited release, but if you can track it down for a good price, then absolutely give it a go. And overall I rated this one 4 stars. And last up is The Watcher by Lael Littke. I had to get a bit of point horror action in for the month. This is about a teenage girl who is obsessed with a soap opera called Lost River, and she is particularly obsessed with one of the characters on the show who looks kind of similar to her, and they share the same initials. And yeah, people at school and her friends, tease her about the fact that she's so obsessed with this show. And at some point, things that are happening in the show start to happen to the main character. And yeah, she has to try and figure out who it is that's doing this to her and basically how to avoid getting killed. Yeah, this was another fun one. It was super readable and enjoyable, and yeah, it definitely had a bit of a kind of curveball at some point that I was not expecting, but I thought was quite interesting. And I also didn't see the reveal either, so yeah, this was just classic point horror, good time. I rated it 3.5 stars. So that's everything I read in September, and I really enjoyed everything I read this month, so that was awesome. My October reading hasn't been quite as successful. I planned a really awesome TBR, and while I'm really excited about reading them, I just have not been reading as much as normal because I've just been feeling so rough. I just can't seem to focus on reading right now. And the other thing is I've got all of these Halloween snacks, and I've got all these pumpkin beers in the fridge, and I just can't eat or drink anything like that at the moment until I get better. So Hopefully I will actually get better before too long, but yeah, it's been a bit of a crappy month so far, to say the least. And anyway, don't want to ramble on about that too much, but I guess I will wrap this video up before I do. I hope you all had a great September and are currently having an awesome October. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!